Yearly podcast presents The Tome Travelers.
Again, it's not a show, it's definitely not a first show out there if it doesn't have some sort of problem right off the bat, right? So, hello everybody and welcome, friends. Welcome to the first episode of a new season of Tome Travelers. Tome Travelers started in 2016 with the goal of becoming a welcoming place for new players into the tabletop RPG sphere to say, hey, welcome. We'd love to show you what is all here, but we introduce people to fabulous writers, content creators. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Let me go ahead and take a moment. Welcome our newest group today. So I have a motley group joining me, I call proudly comrades, who have shared tables with me. So a quick introduction of who you are, what you've been involved in, and if you could describe yourself as a single type of dice, what would it be? Going around the group tonight, let's go ahead and I'm going to ask for Kori, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
As you are aware, I'm Kori. You might have seen me on Midnight Alley or a couple of other streams here. I guess if I were to be any sort of dice, it would be just a basic black and white D6 with, the classic pip style. I'm just kind of that mellow and neutral.
Awesome. I kind of feel similar, but I'll get to me after I introduce everybody else. Let's go ahead and say hi to Shawn then. Shawn.
Hi, my name is Shawn. You may have seen me on Horrors of the Orient Express. Let's see. So what kind of dice am I? Back in the 80s when the Red Box D&D set came out, you got this cheap set of blue plastic dice. You used a crayon to scratch in the numbers. I still have my original one. The edges are all worn off because it's so old, and that's how I feel.
Well, we're moving over then and introducing Sharene.
Hello. I'm Sharene, Mad Fishmonger. I have written for Nerdburger Games, and if I was a dice, I would probably be a D12, the one you use the least. And I have absolutely super glitter dice, just full glitter.
Last member for today, we have Nathan. So coming over to you, Nathan.
Hey everybody, I'm Nathan, he, him pronouns, and you may have seen me here on Rook and Rasp or on the RPG Academy occasionally. My favorite dice has always been the D8 for some reason. It was some of the weapons that first started using it, and for some reason I kind of fell in love with it. Was the weird, odd shape. I won't say anything about me as a character in that, but yeah, it was definitely different, but always my favorite.
Wonderful. Well, so everyone, my name is John. I'm part of the leadership here at Rook and Rasp. And if I had to compare myself to anything, I'm going to take it a little step further. I am one of the D6s from one of those dice blocks that you get where it's a whole bunch of D6s. From Chessex, I think I'm that basic gamer. Don't really need all the frills of the bigger dice companies out there. I like them still, but I like a simple set of dice. They can be pretty colors, whatever, but Chessex is probably my brand. So, with that said, why I'm bringing back Tome Travelers today is that sadly there has been a resurgence of gatekeeping and toxic fandom in the industry, which I feel is kind of ridiculous when the estimates are, they say that the tabletop hobby is going to more than double in size in the next 5 years. That's an incredible number when you really think of it. The hobby doubling from what it is right now. They say that's more than $1 billion per year market surrounding millions of new players buying books, dice towers, terrain, maps, and even more coming over to play with their friends, games, borrow books, drink soda, and let someone else GM. That's kind of where the market is headed. I wanted to do a fun topic and kind of poke a little fun at some of the gatekeeping that's out there. And what I wanted to say was, we're going to address something in gaming with a twist. In board games, there are some people who look at the overall industry of board games and say, all you really need to play is. And then they mention a classic core board game, titles like Monopoly, Life, Candyland, Trivial Pursuit, Trouble, Operation. And there are people out there that say that games even like Pandemic and Dominion are steps too far. You don't need that. And we have that in tabletop RPGs. There is also a crowd that says all you need is this game. You start mentioning other games and they just shut down. Because all you need is that core game. So to my esteemed guests, I've offered a challenge. And let's talk about what our core list of tabletop RPGs would be. But you've got to find a way to compare it to board games that hold a spot on the core board game list. Let's have some fun, and if you're thinking of an analog of a board game that people consider an essential for an RPG, what would it be to you? Does anybody want to start us off?
There's the easy one that we can all start off with, which is probably the game that everybody is most familiar with. I'm going to open up with D&D. I mean,
yeah.
Like, I'm going to have some fun with that one, mainly because I literally just put my notes down on paper and took them out of my head so I can remember them easier. But honestly, D&D is a classic. It was one of the first TTRPGs to come out. And kind of honestly, to me, it feels a little bit like Checkers. That's also a classic board game.
Yeah.
It's not super hard to pick up. It's not complicated. There's a million and one ways you can play it. A lot of variation. So unless somebody wants to argue with me, which I thoroughly encourage, because I know Checkers can be a little too basic for some people. But that's kind of where it feels like that niche kind of fits.
I don't disagree with you to some extent on the Checkers thing, because I mean, if there is a game that most everyone here has been exposed to, and most people like I've interviewed when I used to interview shows, everybody was like, oh yeah, the D&D Red Box was where I started. I do see it as kind of one of the core games out there. It's kind of like, where does it fill in the niche of the board games? Like, what is the core board game that everybody says? You're saying Checkers. I'm actually going to say Monopoly. And while there's a pun in there,
Yeah. No, I have to agree with you on that. Because D&D does have some slight complexities to it, especially when you get into like classes, subclasses, and feats, yada yada yada. You've got that's sort of like the more rules in terms of Monopoly. I had a thought that chess, which requires a lot of strategy and a lot of thinking ahead, would be the Vampire the Masquerade.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. Very much, because that was the whole point of that game for me, was messing with people.
Yeah, the political intrigue and the team versus team kind of stuff. I definitely could see that. But I do want to expand on why I think D&D is also kind of Monopoly is the 21 flavors. Monopoly, it's one of those games that's in the public domain, so much so that like there's a Monopoly for your favorite university. There's Monopoly for various properties out there. I think there was, am I wrong? Was there a Monopoly for Critical Role? Is there a Monopoly yet for Critical Role?
No.
No, okay.
But there's Clue for Critical Role, so...
It's the same thing. It's the same game, the same principles, same ideas, but it's been repackaged with a flavor. And so D&D has that, that case of 21 flavors of a game. Oh, did you want to play D&D in sand? Oh, we have a game for you. Do you want to play D&D in space? Well, we have that for you.
I think you can actually even take it farther, because just about every D20 system out there is a flavor of D&D. Like Spycraft is just modern day spy gear, spy things wrapped around D&D, because you're using the same stats, using proficiency bonuses, things like that. So yeah, I definitely agree that there is a similarity to the different flavors of D&D and Monopoly for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see that.
But at the same time, when talking about D&D, I do have one that I was like kind of kicking around. And also, D&D is also maybe tic-tac-toe. It is the basic, it is the intro, but if D&D is tic-tac-toe, then Greyhawk is Connect 4. Back in 3rd edition, if you got the player's handbook, you pretty much got a great introduction to Greyhawk with the gods and everything else. If you're trying to make your clerics, if you're trying to get your ideas, your base ideas. And so it's like Greyhawk is D&D with just an extra step. You know, it's that if you understand the core of D&D, you can play in the Greyhawk world immediately. Because Tic-Tac-Toe and Connect 4 are pretty much the same game with just a little bit more complexity.
Yeah, I can see that.
So does anybody have another one they want to toss out? I've got plenty, but I'd love to hear from y'all.
I'm actually going to bounce back to something Sharene had said with Vampire. Because Vampire to me is also like one of my top 3. These are my core games. One of them has sentimental value, that's Shadowrun, but Vampire is also another one that's really close to my heart just because I love that kind of dark setting that can get a little bit grim but can also be incredibly hilarious depending on who the storyteller is. What game did you equate Vampire to originally, Sharene?
Yes.
I'm actually going to point out that I have it on my like quick 5-second note list as Risk because like well the political intrigue might be a little bit more complicated than Risk plays out at a standard table, but it feels like it fits that mechanical niche into the mechanics of the game. It can be pretty fun. But I also like Risk, so
You get that? Everybody's ready. I have another one for you. And that is a certain little game. I actually got my games down so I can have some notes and things to pull from. Is this one right here.
Traveler, yeah. Yeah,
Traveler. With Traveler, I was like, Traveler is the game of life. Who here has played like the iPad game Life? Like they've updated Life and turned it into a video game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you got even more of that. But the big thing with Traveler to me is the way that the life paths start off. When you're doing character creation, you start off on that inner track, just like on Life, where you're starting up and you're trying to pick your careers and you're building your backgrounds from different tables. And it kind of really reminds me of Traveler, because Traveler has that whole point of, like the original Traveler, your character could die in character creation, because you might just end up keep on going and making an old man who it's like, hey, you had fun, here's your character, you've got this amazing backstory, but by the way, they've retired. That core identity within tabletop gaming, if you're looking for something like that, I would say it's there. But I also would say there's a little bit of Monopoly. And that is every time I have played it, every time I played Traveler, it ends up being a game of space mortgage. You are flying through the galaxy, planet to planet, figuring out what you can trade to make a little bit more money. Why? Is because you're paying off your shirt. Not paying off your shirt. You're paying off your ship. So you don't own the ship that you're flying through space on, and all you're really doing, like the core idea of why you're going to other planets, is so you can have something to trade to pay off this mortgage on your spaceship.
Well, that's definitely the game of life, but a little bit Monopoly too, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice little kit bash there. To be fair, my only experience with Traveler has been watching Boys from the Baltic Star, but it's definitely one of those systems that I've been interested in trying out at some point. If somebody ever runs a one-shot, I will sign up as fast as I possibly can for it. But no, it does.
It's one of those ones that I played so many like random one-shot indie games. Like I know I've played it, but it was so long ago. I don't remember anymore.
But no, it looks like a fun game.
It's one of those things where maybe, I'm sorry, Mongoose, maybe sometimes it isn't a fun game, but it is one of those core experiences I think that tabletop just has, that once you've played it, you kind of get the idea.
It's definitely Monopoly where it's sometimes not fun.
Definitely. The first time I went and watched the Boys from the Baltic Star and their Traveler stream, I kind of joked, hey, are y'all playing Space Monopoly? And they're just like, yeah, we are. What are some other games that you think of that are core tabletop RPGs?
For me, one of the core ones is Forged in the Dark system, Blades in the Dark. I honestly, again, we keep going back to the same ones for board games, but if a core board game, Monopoly, you are trying to accumulate wealth, you're trying to accumulate territory action sequences and downtimes and things like that. So as you go around the board, there'll be places where you have to really worry about getting into, and there's some places like, this is my territory, I can roll whatever I want and be okay. It's kind of something I've always thought about as being a core mechanic within RPGs is Blades in the Dark.
Cool.
And then trying to look at it as Monopoly kind of makes it a little different.
Cool. Other RPGs, I think, fill in a core gap, and that is going to be Mousetrap as a board game. Mousetrap is this great game of forming, you're not really a team, but you're a team. You're collecting your cheese. You're outrunning the trap. Has everybody here played Mousetrap? Because I do think it's kind of a core game. At some point, you're going to play it. For me, at the same time, I mean, it could be several different games. I like to think of Mousetrap being paranoia, because of that slow dread of something is going to go horribly wrong. If y'all have never played Paranoia, you are essentially a worker in this great machine, or to this society that's ran by a computer, and horrible, terrible things happen through it.
So it's about right for Mousetrap, and that also feels like Paranoia, what little I've played of it. But I'm also going to point out, it also feels a little like Savage Worlds, too.
Ooh, how so?
Because while the mechanics stay the same from setting to setting, you also have some incredible variety within the mechanics. And you kind of build your Savage Worlds game from kind of some modular blocks within the Savage Worlds core books. Like, you've got your fantasy companions and your sci-fi companions. Each individual setting will take and remove some rules or change something. You kind of get that interplayability. You can make your own thing with Savage Worlds pretty easy, and that kind of fits the core mechanic of Mousetrap, where you're building a mousetrap. You're trying to build a better mousetrap.
The other one that I kind of was wrestling with on this topic was Shadowrun. Because I think Shadowrun, there's something to be said for putting together a group of people who have the same goal. They might not be friends, they might not be on the same team, but they have the same goal of getting their piece of the cheese. And there is the corporations, trying to come down on you, just like that net.
That's true. There's so many variations of it, but I remember it being a sort of werewolf game where you play it at schools and stuff too sometimes. Like, one person's the werewolf and everybody goes to sleep, and then one person disappears, and you're trying to figure out who the werewolf is. I think that kind of reminds me of the Mousetrap thing too, because you're also like, you're hoping not to be the victim in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe at that point it's a little bit of operation.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, yeah. You want to be the one that gets away without injury. Without. That always made me jump every time when I was a kid and I played it. I would be like, I would expect it. I'm like, okay, the buzzing and it's coming. It's okay, and then it would happen every time.
Yeah.
And then it would just make it worse because, of course, then you can't get it out and.
They were saying that what is up with some of the games that we used to play and the amount of anxiety-inducing mechanics there were. Like
Perfection.
Perfection is a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, is a great course. The tabletop RPG for that would be Call of Cthulhu. You're playing that and you know you're going to be scared.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're purposely going to be scared. I mean, that's the best way to...
That actually is a really good point.
Or Call of Cthulhu is like Snakes and Ladders, where you think you've gotten somewhere, you think you're getting ahead, and then you fail that, or you pass that sanity check, and you comprehend the horrors, and that's not good. You don't want to do that.
Call of Cthulhu, I think we could also use Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was thinking of the same one, Sorry.
Yeah. Yes, I'm getting ahead. No!
There were two games in that genre. It's Sorry, and what's the other one where you're bumping people out of the way?
Trouble?
Trouble, yes.
Yeah.
I
just remember
Trouble? Yeah. Which one is
Trouble
the
had
one
the Pop-O-Matic bubble.
There you go, the Pop-O-Matic.
Yep.
It's so satisfying. Like, I can just remember how that feels. It was such a distinctive texture, I guess.
Oh yeah, that mechanical feeling to that bubble.
Yeah.
That sound.
Is there a game that rubs that itch for anybody? I mean,
yeah, that's the one thing that TTRPGs are missing. Besides, I think mostly it's just the rattling of the dice, but a lot of TTRPGs, you don't get a lot of good, satisfying chunky buttons to push.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no tactile element to most RPGs.
The dice, a little.
There is one. I wouldn't consider this a core game because it's such a specific niche game. In fact, I don't think it ever made it out of playtesting, but I do know that there is an RPG where cake is a mechanic, where pieces of cake are the mechanic.
That's amazing.
I have to dig that up. It's not a core by any stretch of the imagination, but I remember it being on my radar.
Well, and it's that. Now, I will say that is the kind of pull that I think indie RPGs have.
You know
Is
what?
that, oh,
I was just gonna say indie RPGs are like that one random game that you find like at the cabin or your grandma's or your auntie's, cupboard somewhere, and it's like, they've got Monopoly and there's Sorry and there's like everything you've ever heard of, and then there's like just this one random game, and you're like, what?
What is
That's what is Octopus Time? What? I've never seen what? Where did this come from? And you just find that like one random game. That's where sort of all like indie RPGs kind of fall in that. Like,
yeah, I do tend to agree. But when I think of indie RPGs, I mean, a lot of them do scratch certain itches. Like, I think, I don't want to say for sure, but Banana Chan, I think, had a game that she was working on that involved stickers. Yes, we're adults. We have stickers. There are different things that we're getting stickers for. My iPad, the back case of it is covered with stickers. But some people hang on. Yeah, some people hang on to them. And so imagine an RPG built around the idea of the stickers that you have that you can collect together before the game. And I think that's the thing about indie RPGs, that it fills that weird niche of all the things that we are looking for, that are tactile experiences or visual experiences, or just things that we wouldn't think about normally.
So what if indie RPGs are that, and what if they're all the home rules we use on games on the base game? Like, that's our game, but now we don't do that here. We do these 5 other things because this is for us and this is what we like to do. So it's like going to your friend's house and they're like, no, we don't play that way. Here's what we do. And you're like, oh, okay. This is a totally different game at this point.
No, like that Monopoly rule where like you put money in the middle and maybe if you get it or not on
free parking.
And then we also had a rule that if you played with my buddy Max, first rule of the game was get Max out of the game first. If you do not get Max out of the game first, he will win. The first rule of the game, eliminate Max, then continue.
But speaking of like those house rules, Uno is never played correctly half the time. So
I found that out. I don't even remember what the rule was, but during a house game we were playing, it's like somebody actually played rules as written for Uno, and I was like, even my wife was like, I've never heard of this rule, and we've been playing it for like over 20 years. So,
and funny enough, you can connect that back to D&D as well. Everybody's been playing their own version, their own style, Pathfinder, D&D, those games that have been around for ages, and everybody has the things they like from each version, and it becomes a house rules. No, we don't roll the character like this. Here's how we roll it. We do this like this. So it's funny enough, indie RPGs are absolutely that. But it also comes back to those core things that are like, we've just moved away from this. Here's how we like to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to toss another one out because it's gotten mentioned. And we talked about Chutes and Ladders, saddling Chutes and Ladders with Candyland. It is a fixed track. It's a very fixed map with paths that you know of ahead of time. And your pitfalls, traps. Candyland and Chutes and Ladders have serious moments of winning. When you beat those games, you know you beat those games. And I'm going to toss Ravenloft in there.
Because the thing about Stakes and Ladders or Chutes and Ladders is that it's 100% chance. So all of your movement is wherever you go is 100% on the roll of the dice. There's no strategy. There's no planning. There's nothing you can do except roll the right number. To me, that feels more like the really old school D&D modules that were just murder. And it was really about, how far your character got into the dungeon before they died, not the expectation that my character will survive. Because there was so much of it that it was entirely left up to chance. Like you could try a little bit to boost your chances, but you had to roll correctly. If you rolled wrong, you're done.
Which I think is really any TTRPG. I mean, you have to roll collect correctly, otherwise you're done. If you've got a series of unfortunate rolls, like in combat or whatever, I think that applies to, like you were saying, shoots and ladders. I mean, it's the same kind of concept. Yeah.
I have a few games though where like in capers you can gamble with your wins. In Stagged Heroism, if you bank failure points, if you lose previously you can use that to win later, so it is not that kind of tilts the balance away from chance a little bit.
True.
And then also, like, if you're a high level D&D character, and you're adding like plus 13 to basically everything you roll, like it's pretty hard to fail at that point.
Yeah.
That kind of does bring up an interesting point. A lot of what was considered old core at a certain point, like 3.5, in how we play games today, both in terms of what are considered core board games and what's considered core to the role-playing community, has kind of shifted too, away from like those heavily lethal mechanics to being a lot about collaborative storytelling, or cooperative gaming has become a very popular thing in the board game hobby. So it's actually kind of an interesting way to look at that shift too.
Yeah, for sure. To add to that, thinking about old board games and old RPGs was win or lose. You win or you lose. There was nothing in between. If it's individual or as a group, you win or you lost. And now we've shifted to more toward let's have fun along the way, or there's the option to do that. Let's have fun along the way. Let's tell a story. Let's play a board game where it doesn't really matter in the end. Here's what we're trying to do. And so I think that has been a big shift to that, Kori, and I like it. But
I mean, it's been fun to watch. Like,
Sure.
I had a chance to play in a 3.5 game where it did feel very, not even intentionally adversarial between the DM and the players. That's the way the mechanics worked, was very crunchy and things like that. And now we have games and core systems like Apocalypse World where it's very mechanically light. And it's more about the journey than any sort of getting to a destination. It's just kind of fun to see that kind of play out too across both hobbies.
Oh yeah,
sure.
I felt like, for me, Vampire was that big breakout thing, because I'd started at 3.5, I played Shadowrun, which is, so crunchy. So I played a few, really, really crunchy games, but I have a really active imagination, and I like to write, and I like to sort of little stories about my characters. And I would, it was so frustrating to be in these games where you die really quickly and you never really got to have a lot of fun with your character. And then I got into a vampire LARP, and I played a character for a ridiculously long time, because it became more about the characters and the relationships between them, and the interactions and how much fun that was, and the scheming and the planning, and but it was really all about social interaction. And I think it went from passing the time to now like an intentional, let's look at each other instead of at a screen, and interact with each other. And because you're sort of intentionally getting together, with people, sometimes on a screen too, but like taking that time to spend time with another person, you don't want to be adversarial in that moment. Like, why would you take time out of your day just to bully somebody?
Well, yeah.
You're right.
No, there are several games I kind of feel like that, but the collaborative versus the competitive issue. But that's kind of why with Candyland and Shoots and Ladders, I was like, it is adversarial sometimes in that game as well. But there was that set point, that set ending beat. What is his name in Ravenloft? Strahd. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like the point of that game then was defeating him, and now we have a wider variety that I think people should definitely be embracing.
Oh wow! Sorry.
Yeah.
No, thinking about defeating Strahd, I just was totally brought to mind a board game that I used to play with my daughter when she was younger, which was called Don't Wake Daddy. And the whole point was you had to sneak past Daddy without making noise, and every time you made noise, you had to push the counter on a clock and he would just pop up at random intervals. It's like, oh my God, that's Strahd. That's the whole concept of Ravenloft.
So
with
Strahd is
Wig
daddy.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so officially Strahd is daddy.
Strahd is daddy.
I think there are some
I think
gamers
that was known. I think that was
There's
known.
some gamers out there that would definitely agree with you, and some fanfic
Yes.
writers who definitely agree with you.
Oh yes, I've seen those.
All right.
Too much time on the internet.
Oh, come on. No such thing. But one of the games I think is core that I've had some trouble finding a spin-off in a way was Deadlands. I know, Kori, you mentioned Savage Worlds, which is kind of where Deadlands went. But Deadlands to me is that one of those core experiences in tabletop RPG gaming that I think people should try to experience at some point. And so I was trying to think, what tabletop game could even be a parallel to that?
This might be a little too on the nose, but poker, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't get a chance to experience like the deep early Deadlands where you had like the different colored paper clips for resource management and stats, but you still have some of that element in Deadlands even today, and you still have that management mechanic that you need to monitor between poker and blackjack, where you have to know what your cards are and kind of be cognizant of what others have, which is kind of Deadlands itself, being aware of who has what up their sleeve.
So
At least that's what it feels like to me.
what about Ticket to Ride? In Ticket to Ride, you have a lot of different ways to go wherever you want to go. You have to watch your hand, what you're getting. You have to watch what other people are doing and what they have, so that they're trying to get to a destination. You may be trying to get to a destination and may need that play off of each other. So as you start doing combat in Deadlands and start pulling out cards and who knows what, Ticket to Ride may be something where you have to kind of plan steps ahead, but still have alternative routes to wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I didn't
also,
think Ticket to Ride.
We used to play a card game called Millborn.
Yeah.
1,000 Miles.
Yes. No. I discovered Millborn about 5 to 8 years ago. I had never played it before. Yes, absolutely.
Super fun. It's super fun. It's apparently very. And we used to play it. We used to have one of those drag behind pop-up trailers, and we used to go camping with this, and we would play Millborn. And yeah, you're trying to get these cards and they have numbers on them. The idea is that you're driving and you're supposed to be the first. You're sort of having a race in your car, and you are trying to get to be the first to drive 1,000 miles, and you get cards in your hand that have numbers on them, but then you also have like car accident, stop, and things like that. And so yeah, that's the same sort of concept. That was immediately what I thought of. You have to know what you have, but you also have to know what other people have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about like core board games, especially giving my age, I tend to always pigeonhole like things that were wrote in the 60s, the 70s. But for me, actually, a more modern core tabletop game that would be an analog to Deadlands and like the resource management, knowing what you have, knowing what you can get. Magic the Gathering.
Oh, now that is not one I thought of.
So, especially now, to copy what Kori said, a little bit on the nose, because the newest set that just dropped is like an Old West theme. So that's what kind of made me think. And then I was thinking about it. So like if you had in your hand, you can only have 4 of the same type of card if you're playing standard, and it's like, look, I've already spent 3 of my lightning. What is the likelihood that I'm going to get another lightning to help? Yeah, that's the whole resource management and knowing what your player has and how to get around what they have. Maybe the same thing.
Yeah. Well, the other game that I thought of, I think it's too cheap a shot. And it's not even like I'm trying to insult it, but Bang. Has everybody here played Bang before?
Mm-mm.
Long time ago.
I think I've
Long
played it
time.
like twice.
Yeah. It combines a lot of those topics of card playing and other things, but puts it in a Western theme, which now I guess, rather than Savage Worlds really being a flavor of Deadlands, Deadlands is more the flavor of Savage Worlds. It's become this thing underneath it that kind of holds up so many amazing properties. And I love that. I love those games in tabletop that the mechanics work and people are like, hey, what's another way I can use these mechanics? Savage Worlds, they're kind of core systems. But yeah, Savage Worlds coming out of that. Obviously, I'm going to say Twister is totally LARPing.
Was wondering how to fit Twister in. Yeah, no, that
You
makes
know,
sense.
Invading
Yeah.
personal space, right?
Yeah.
You know, a very physical game. Is it a board game? I don't know, but where is LARPing in role play as far as tabletop to everything else? And oh my goodness, the amount of game designers now hitting up LARP. Like there are so many new LARPs coming out and new properties getting made into LARPs. I'm actually very surprised in the last year alone, honestly. So, anybody got any others? Or a game that you think is a core game that you can't think of a board game for?
So one thing that's come up, it is in same vein, whatever. Jenga and Dread. That Jenga is a core game we've all played 100 times. Dread is a fun game, but there's nothing quite like having a story based around a physical touch, or when you're trying to take that block off. It for some reason ramps up the pressure so much more, and it's not the same as what we've been talking about, but there's still an analog between the actual core board game as Jenga and an RPG game, and how they interact and make things so much better for both.
Definitely. Dread is an amazing game. One of the greatest games I've ever watched get played out on as an actual play was a game of Dread. And Jenga, yeah, it is a core game. I'm a kindergarten teacher by day, and we just got in our classroom a party set of Jenga. So the giant tower set, like the big one, we actually
nice.
have that in our class now. I'm just like, okay, this is where it's hit.
That's awesome.
Kind of cool.
Other games, I've got two, and that is first and foremost BattleTech. I love BattleTech. I love MechWarrior. It's been around for a long time. It spawned video games galore and computer games and whole range of different strategy games as a result. Is it a core game, and does it have an analog in board gaming, or is it a board game?
Especially the modern incarnation that they started selling, it really is more a board game, a tabletop game than it is anything else, especially with the Alpha Strike rule set, which really streamlines everything. It makes it feel less crunchy, more fun, more intuitive. But yeah, I definitely think it has an analog. I think Risk is the best analog to BattleTech. I mean, it's not sci-fi, you're not dealing with giant mechas, but the concept is the same. You're moving troops around, you're trying to get the superior maneuvering to take out your enemies. So I think that one to me is BattleTech. Risk and BattleTech are kind of synonymous.
I guess the question is Warhammer a board game?
Ooh,
If we have Twister as one, then we might as well.
Yeah,
kind of the same. Yeah.
I mean, I think yes, because it's tabletop and it's not necessarily RPG.
Yeah.
Warhammer effectively has 2 or 3 different RPGs at this point, because you had Dark Heresy, you had
We've got that book somewhere.
which one is it? Which company is listed on the bottom right corner? So it's Fantasy
Fantasy
Flight.
Flight.
Nice. You got the first. That's the yep.
One thought, what I can't seem to think of a sort of board game analog off the top of my head is GURPS. And GURPS is very modular. A lot of people look at it and they look at all the rules and they go, "Oh my God, there's so many rules." And but they always seem to miss that paragraph that says all of these rules are optional. Start with the base and then just add on whatever you feel like. Pick and choose, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I played a really excellent Discworld GURPS session.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I can't really think of a board game analog where that's sort of more modular that you can add things to, unless it's more like sort of a Settlers of Catan kind of thing.
That's exactly the one I was thinking of, that modern day core game, which would be Catan, for adding on to it. And yeah, definitely.
Catan or Flux?
Oh, Flux is a great one.
I have 2 Fluxes.
Because Flux can be kind of combined, or you can play them separately. I don't necessarily consider Flux a core to the board game.
I would too, yeah. One of the modern ones for sure.
Yeah. In a way, it's unavoidable, or at least my experience was. My first exposure to Flux was college. In College Town, the people who needed a board game to sit around and play, one of them was Flux. And so I think it was that hip new board game, card game, whatever. Yeah, that kind of brings up an idea of it. Is Flux a new core classic?
Oh yeah.
I'm really surprised at how popular it, how popular it got. Like I can't find the other box. I've got Zombie Flux, and I have Batman the Animated Series Flux.
Nice.
You can get all kinds of them, and I was just so surprised at how many people have played it, and it's so easy. The mechanic is just so simple.
I think that's a perfect thing for GURPS then, because the
Yeah.
flavors of GURPS as well. I remember I didn't have as much exposure to GURPS. I knew about it, but a lot of the game and places where I was didn't carry it. And my first time I saw it in store, it also had a Vampire the Masquerade GURPS. Because for a while there, everything you could imagine as a flavor of role-playing came out with GURPS as well.
Yeah,
I'll
it
show
just
you
seemed
that.
like a general universal role playing system. So
Mm-hmm.
general or generic, one of the two.
And I'm not sure how many of you remember this.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
Hey, geek.
An important game. Did you the
Oh, yeah.
familiar that
I think sometimes with some of the board games, there comes a point where people keep trying to reach with it and like make more for it that eventually starts to lose popularity the more there is of it out there. While Munchkin is still insanely popular, it is nowhere near, in my opinion, as popular as it was when it first came out.
Yeah, I agree.
Might hit a resurgence. They are re-releasing the
Oh yeah, the big box.
big box.
I have one more, and if anybody has more, feel free, but I definitely have one that also needs a discussion. And that is the Palladium system in that core group? Is it a core experience? Is playing a Palladium game a core experience of role-playing games?
I think that's a generation thing, John. I mean, I grew up with them and I absolutely love them, and I would love to talk anybody into playing them. But in the current narrative gameplay style, it's just Palladium games are so crunchy.
They are?
From experience, yes, I would consider Rifts to be kind of that old guard core gaming experience. But as a newer guard player, apparently, I could not justify getting into Rifts as a game. I kind of feel the same way about chess, so if we want to make the parallel there. Rifts, everybody talked about it. But when it came time to start playing a game of Rifts, that's the only time I've quit a game in anger before a character was even finished rolling, because it was so murky. The way they had it laid out in the books was not the way their YouTube did it.
Oh, no.
And the way they YouTube did it literally said, hey, do it this way. And we wrote the thing. There was so much
Now, that's
going on with
surprising,
Rifts.
because
Like, it was-
the tales behind the scenes of Palladium is, my game is great, it doesn't need to be changed. Now I think maybe that opinion has obviously shifted since they started also putting out a Savage Worlds Rifts.
There's also a lot more I can get into with Rifts that may not befit this specific episode, but Rifts is
Fair.
definitely one of the games that I do not like it for a lot of reasons. Beyond it's just crunchy to the point of self-gatekeeping, almost.
Yeah.
And that's funny because when I think of Palladium, I don't automatically go to Rifts. Again, this is because of an age thing. I think Robotech, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Superheroes Unlimited, which unfortunately all have the same problems that Rift do. They're super crunchy. Character creation is not exactly intuitive.
Linear.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time flipping through the book trying to figure things out, but especially early on with the Palladium stuff, it was a great concept that, and I think this kind of harkens back to stay on topic, like games like Mousetrap or even Catan now, is that it was so modular. I mean, I could take things from Robotech and throw them into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, into Superheroes Unlimited. And I have to agree with Kori. The one time I tried to play Rifts, it got into such a severe argument during character creation, we never went anywhere else. It was just like, done.
I did make it into a Rifts game that did actually finish. We were all parts of, I can't remember what it's called. I want to say the Brotherhood of Humanity or something like that, which I might be juxtaposing the Fallout TV show with X-Men right now in my brain, and I might have the name completely wrong. We're essentially the bad guys. It's like in that one movie. Oh, is it possible we're the baddies? But so yeah, we were the bad guys in the universe, and it still worked. It was still a fun game. But the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, which just had a Kickstarter and made over, I know it made over $1 million. is it possible that that could propel Palladium back into the spotlight? I think that's going to be a hard sell until we see the books.
Yeah, I think that Kickstarter is more on the property than it is the fact
Yeah,
that it's
totally.
Palladium writing it.
Yeah.
In fact, Palladium for a lot of people that are in the scene is it's like, oh god, not another Palladium.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm like, I love Palladium. I've ran the game on the channel, or at least in different things. Shawn, were you in my Heroes Unlimited game where it was the
No, I
cybernetic?
wasn't.
You weren't in that
No.
one?
Oh wait, the one that we
An underground cybernetic racing,
yep, that
boat
was the one I
sport?
was in. It was that was great.
Now, that I ran that with Heroes Unlimited, and Heroes Unlimited to this day, even though right now I'm in the middle of a Masks, a new generation game, the Heroes Unlimited RPG is my favorite Heroes style RPG.
Yes, for sure.
I think that it still has the one problem Palladium has, in my opinion. The one problem, in my opinion, is their morality system, where you're either sane, megalomaniac, insane, or something like that. It's like you got 4 different qualities of your psyche, and it's triggering for many. Palladium, people have stayed away from it for their own reasons, and it doesn't gel really with the new gamer. But is it an experience? Is it an experience that you would say is a core? Is it something that you could do and then you're like, yeah, I have played Refs. Yeah, I have played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I think is going to be the next resurgence if Palladium has one.
Yeah,
Honestly-
I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if someone was wanting to play Riffs, I would almost want to, and you're gonna have to help me, John, because I can't remember it.
Uh-huh.
It is the French underwater game that we played.
Polaris.
Polaris. See, Polaris to me has the feel of Rift, but was more fun.
I totally get that. Polaris is such a wonderful game, and now that I understand the mechanics of it, it turns out like that game has the exact same mechanics, relatively, as Pendragon from Chaosium. Where I'm sorry to even go off on this, but it's to me very interesting, and actually I want to save that for the D20 episode because Polaris uses a D20, and so does Pendragon, but it uses it in a way that no other game out there does, and I think that is quite a challenging feat. I'd love to talk about that on a separate show. But does anyone else have any other things that you think, if you wanted somebody to experience the broad range RPGs out there, is there a game that you think needs to be in that core list?
Oh yeah, definitely. It hasn't even been brought up yet, but anything by Modifius.
Mhm.
The dual D20 system, I think, is just what's great about Modifius is they have so many properties that, if you have Star Trek fans, that's a great introduction into RPGs is playing their Star Trek games, or Fallout, or if you want to go uber sci-fi political, play Dune through their system. If you're wanting to stay away from D&D as your first experience, I think that's a great place to start. Now, how that ties into board games,
because we're kind of hitting that flavor, the flavor changes, but it's the same game.
Yeah.
Which a lot of companies do right now. I love Aliens, but I don't think it's a core experience yet. I think that it could become one. It is such a well-written game and absolutely beautiful books that it could go that direction. And that's Free League, I believe. And it's that Free League system that they've been hitting really hard recently.
And it is a great experience if you're into Alien. I don't know that if you're not really into Alien, like poor Kori got wrung out like a dish rag and one of the games we were in. I mean, I think that was the exact description. So, but yeah.
Mr. Cuddles.
Oh, that's right.
Brev will never let me live that down. And that was absolutely one of my favorite moments.
Free League with Aliens did that property right. And it feels unique in that even though it's using the same system that's from the Mutant Year Zero games and the Tales from the Loop, I think uses it. Might be wrong.
I think.
But that game knocks it out of the park. It's not a core experience.
No, even though you're going to have some great experiences, but yeah.
I think all of us have an RPG and a board game that we think should be on that list. For me, I love the Capers system. I really do. I think it's so much fun, and I think if you've only ever played D&D, it would be such a refreshing change. I think it's really important to sort of experience different ways of doing that mechanic. I think that kind of helps kind of just sort of broaden your mind in terms of how an RPG can work. And I just find it has that really great balance of like giving you just enough description to know what you're talking about, but enough room that you flavor it entirely in your own. and the other sort of board game. It's so hard to pick, you know. I have this ridiculous board game that was put up by White Wolf many years ago called Mwah Ha 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 Ha. That's literally what it's called. And you play a supervillain, and you have a doomsday weapon, and there are limited resources. And so as you go around the table, you collect and trade these resources in order to build your doomsday device. And so you can trade with other people, but you can also betray them because you are bad guys.
Yeah.
And so it does take quite a long time to play. It's a good 2-3 hours, you know, of a game, like a good game of Risk or whatever, where you're kind of committing an afternoon to play this game, kind of a thing. So, but it's quite fun, you know, being able to backstab people and then suffering for it later, and then, you know, trying to build up your doomsday device so you can destroy the world, threaten to destroy the world in order to get whatever it is you want. It is really quite fun, and the art is really cute. And if you have, I live in Canada, so a long, cold, wintry afternoon, it's a good time. It's too cold to go outside. Just gonna hang out and play a game. So it's quite good for that. But that's one of my recommendations for people. Just want to try something goofy. It's pretty fun.
In addition to the topic, does anyone else have any games that you think of that are that core tabletop game that you think people should play, and also a board game? I think this would be a good note to go out on, honestly.
Yeah,
I know I have one of each. They're not one-to-one tied together, but my one recommendation, you should definitely try this game at some point, is the Fantasy Age Blue Rose game. That is one of my favorites. I mean, second only, Shards comes as a close second, but that's only because Shards was the second ever RPG I've ever heard of after D&D, because you can't really escape D&D being your first. But Fantasy Age is one I've actually got a chance to play, and it's such a beautifully unique system on its own, and Blue Rose takes some really fun core concepts on characterization and character development and figures out a way to mechanize them in some fun, compelling ways. So that's definitely on my top you have to play this game list. And then my board game for that, it's kind of an older one. I don't know where people would place it on the board game chart, but for me, Mancala is one of those core games that you've got to play at least once.
Yeah, that's so fun.
It's a board game,
and you can play it. You could play it with stones and dirt.
Yep.
No, it's literally satisfies the magpie brain in me.
No, I actually hadn't thought of anything with Mancala. I have constant exposure to it because that's yet another game that is in my classroom. During the summer school, because I also work a summer camp when school is not going on. Mancala, I'm actually very surprised the amount of kids that know how to play it in this generation today. So yeah, definitely. Y'all want mine, or Nathan, you got one, or?
I've got one, but yeah. So real quick, a core game for me in my experience in RPGs has been The Quiet Year. One of the first games that I played GMless, just tell a story and see what happens. And that opened up a whole bunch of new things in a whole bunch of new ways. But that was kind of my first, what in the world are we doing? Why are we doing this? Oh, I get it now. Now I get it. And as for a board game for me is probably Dominion. There's so many different ways to playing and additional cards that you can add in Dominion. But it just is a core game for me that whenever my friends get together, it's like, hey, we can play these two sets now. And then, they play totally different and totally separate from each time you play it. Just one of those things that we've always enjoyed playing at this point.
I hate to be that person. I mean, everybody's throwing out great RPGs. They're unique, but I just got to go with D&D. There's just something about it that pulls you in, especially with the new rule set being more narrative. You can pull off the rule of cool so much easier. You actually give people those moments of greatness. And then for my board game, I got so many board games that I could go with, but I'm going to go with the one that we pull out and torment anybody that comes over to the house and wants to play games. It's going to be DC Deck Builder. It's just a fun experience. It's got so much variety to it, and it's just really easy, quick to pick up, to play. But the strategy, the different card types, all of that comes as you learn the game to play it. But yeah, DC Deck Builder is the one that you usually will introduce people to.
Unless anybody's got another one, I'm going to toss out my two. And I'm going to start off with, for me, as far as a role-playing game that I think is a core experience. I am going to weirdly say, in the World of Darkness, Mage.
Ooh.
And the reason being, so Mage in the World of Darkness, World of Darkness has vampires, has werewolves. They're usually the most popular. People talk about it. Licenses are fought over them. But Mage has these, what they call circles of different elements like prime or entropy or materia. And you create your spells. Now, coming out of D&D, which was the first, I had played D&D, Battletech, Shadowrun, all these games that had written out spells. If the game had magic, it was written out and it was purposeful. But then playing a mage, my first game, the GM's finally comes over to me, hands me the character sheet, and this is like, what do you want to do in this situation? I'm in this game, and I'm like, well, do you have anything like Fireball? Was literally my words. What can I do that's Fireball? And he had to explain it to me. He's like, no, you have to build your spell. And I'm like, well, how do I do that? And the moment it clicked for me to actually understand I am crafting in the world of the game, it's not just a set variable, that was for me a huge moment in my gaming life. So Mage for World of Darkness.
Awesome.
I should run my modified changeling game for you sometime.
I'm 100% down, guarantee it. Now, board game. And this is just a personal opinion. It's my favorite board game, and it shouldn't be. And that is Pandemic Legacy.
Oh, it's so good.
So Pandemic, I do not like games that you play and you are so up against the game that you're more than likely going to die. And you're more than likely going to lose. That's just not the kind of game that I go for usually on a board game. And Pandemic, in fact, pardon me, the games by the creator of Pandemic are probably my least favorite games. Pandemic. What's some of the others? Do y'all remember the other two? It's like the one where the island is sinking and you're
I work in a gaming store and I can't remember anything right now. As soon as you ask, my mind completely blank.
Not Forbidden Island.
Yes, that is it.
Okay.
Forbidden Island and Forbidden something. That's his wheelhouse. Is games that you are up against and you're going to lose, and it's going to drive you nuts. But Pandemic Legacy, I shouldn't like it. It is amazing. I love that there's a story in it, and your characters improve. Unlike in regular Pandemic, where you're just playing a singular idea, the game has characters with pictures, and you are improving your character every time you play, giving you a better chance of succeeding every time. And you'll end up playing through it probably in the ballpark of about 20 times before the overall Pandemic Legacy ends. And it's a storyline, which I'm a role player, primarily. And the idea of a storyline and characters and this overarching theme, Pandemic Legacy, I think is a game that everybody should get out there and play. I literally do think that. I think if you're a role player and you're looking for a board game, get Pandemic Legacy. If you're a board gamer and you've never tried a Legacy game before, get Pandemic Legacy. I think it is the best out of all of them. Well, with that said, this is our first episode of Tome Travelers. Kind of an easy-going episode. I want everybody to have a chance, get to know each other a little bit. This is also a community show where we're going to bring on different people from our community, different topics that resonate with them. They're allowed to come on. It's really a talk show, but we wanted a community get-together show. And if you are interested in getting to know a little bit about Rook and Rasp, go to our website, rookandrasp.com, and you can follow us there, see what we're up to, get in on our games. You could even possibly get on this show at some point. We also do have a YouTube channel, and I think that's going to be it for now, but we will be sure to drop in our links when this goes live to YouTube. Links to everybody here who is on the show tonight, the different projects that y'all are involved in. I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining me for our first episode. And with that said, we look forward to our next one. Probably going to be some point next month, and we'll be scheduling it then. So, all right. Night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.